Paul, Peter Dutton and Ted O'Brien went to Port Stephens today to speak about wind farms. So Chris Bowen has insisted on having thousands of kilometres. I have to check the figure, but I think it's in total about 2,000 kilometres worth of wind farms at least 3 different locations off the coast of Australia. Mostly it's the east coast of Australia. There's one in South Australia off the coast. Paul, I mean, it sounds well and good, fine, let's have wind farms, but when you speak to the local communities, and as Peter Dutton highlighted today, this is going to be extremely damaging for the environment, for the whales. Well, let's have a look at what Dutton had to say.
But it's very clear to me that this is fast growing into a national scandal. The government hasn't done the work. They haven't undertaken the environmental impact statements that need to be undertaken in any other like development.
And thanks to my excellent producer, who was very fast, and now know that Chris Bowen is installing 1,159 square.
Your team's on it now. Good, Sam. Well done, everyone.
So, Paul, what do you think about this?
Look, this is the next shoe to drop. I mean, the political conversation about climate change and action on climate change, we know where the politics of that is. But the reality is that the people who have screamed most for this are the ones who have done nothing to actually produce renewable energy. None of the teals are suggesting that on their local beach any of this stuff should be happening. None of them saying that Centennial Park in Sydney should be turned into a solar farm instead. No, that's all for the bush. This particular thing in and around Port Stephens, the expectation here is that it's such a Labor electorate that even if they do this, even if they create a sense of
it's
aggro,
still safe.
Even if they get 10% of the vote with a local independent who says don't build them, we'll still win it anyway. I don't think that's going to be the case all over the country, but put the pressure on the MPs who say this is the future to be the ones who suggest their parts of Australia should be changed. Instead, what ends up happening mostly goes into National Party electorates. Why? Because they don't vote Labor. Further punish them and they'll get more of it after the voice vote.
It's also this sense, Liz, that the government doesn't care or didn't even give the local communities a chance to have their say about this. They didn't even go to
consultation.
No consultation.
Yeah,
no consultation.
Just, this is what we're doing.
I think they don't do it because they know, obviously no one's going to be like, absolutely trash our pristine views for the sake of your green dream that most of us secretly don't believe in anyway, even if it is a very Labor electorate. But they know that if we do consult, we'll get an overwhelming response with a big thumbs down, and we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So it actually looks better if I do it without permission. As they say, better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. But once it's done, and they know it. That's why they don't put it out to community consultation. They know what the community will say.
And
already.
Labor's also flagged its entire election strategy between now and whatever the federal government, federal election is Peter Dutton or Booga. That's it, right? It's just the whole thing.
Well, they did that with Scott Morrison. They make it the man. They did it with Tony Abbott. They make it the man.
And they learn it from the Democrats, particularly in the United States, where if you can turn around and say, democracy's on the ballot, then you don't actually notice what the consequence is of the person that you keep re-electing, you keep sending back to run. I think Australians obviously are way smarter than all of that, but you watch the hatred that comes out of that press gallery as a result of Dutton's role in the referendum means that narrative, the most divisive, the most extreme, all of this stuff, that in part is the messaging that they'll want people to vote on, rather than, we promised you action on cost of living. In fact, it all got worse. Many other things have got worse on our watch, but it's all about trust us because we're not the other guy.
And you'd have to say that cost of living was Albanese's main pitch before the election. It was his central pitch. The cost of everything, groceries, petrol, everything is too high under Scott Morrison. We're going to lower it. And instead, there were 11 interest rate rises under Albanese, only one under the coalition government. And, you know, no one can say that this is the Albanese government's fault that we've had inflation.
But the whole point was that they owned it. The whole point.
They promised it, exactly.
Correct. Peter Malinauskas was, when he was on his way to becoming South Australian Premier, was very open in the Sky News People's Forum, where he turns around and said, look, there's a limit to what government controls.
Sure.
But Albanese weaponised at the last election, pretending that he could fix what couldn't be fixed by government at times, and that means that he lied to people.
Yeah, he did it knowing that he couldn't.
So that's why I bring it up every night. Yeah. It's the central lie that got into the Prime Ministership.
And Liz, not only that, but he's not responsible for inflation, but he has made it worse through things like their IR reforms, which slow productivity, which, again, push up inflation.
100%. And there's so many simple measures that they could take as well, just to take the pressure off people. 100%, to name about 1,000, but they haven't lifted a finger. And there's devastating, a headline we were reading out on the front of the page of the Daily Telly last night was how many people have gone hungry over the last year or so. And the numbers were just absolutely unthinkable that this is happening in Australia. It's people you know,
households.
it's people I know that have literally had to go without food that they would have otherwise eaten in order to pay their other bills and put petrol in the tank and etc. and so on. It's absolutely unthinkable, and this has happened on his watch. And let no one forget, this is the man who did get elected on a "I'll help you out with the cost of living," and then did nothing for the first how long of his term, then bang on about his pet project while people were doing it tough themselves.